A few months ago, my daughter asked me a very simple question. Who are your heroes, Dad? I said, well, besides my father, hoping she would get the hint, one of my big heroes is Malcolm McLean. I realized that Malcolm McLean is not really known on social media today, but in 1955, McLean invented a metal box that changed the world, the shipping container. That invention reduced the cost of shipping cargo by more than 90%, and as a consequence, global trade increased 200 times and lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty by connecting them and their goods to global markets at very, very low cost. I'm sure McLean's invention started with a big dream to transform the transportation industry,
Let's consider two types of mistake that can occur when a manager actually starts to set up a duplicate system to replicate a successful process. Firstly, perhaps he forgets that he was just trying to copy another process and starts trying to improve on it. Another mistake is trying to use the best parts of various different systems in the hope of creating the perfect combination. Unfortunately, attempts like these usually turn out to be misguided and lead to problems. Why? Well, for various reasons. Perhaps there weren't really any advantages after all, because the information wasn't accurate. Or perhaps the business settings weren't really comparable. More typically, the advantages are real enough, but there are also disadvantages that have been overlooked. For example, the modifications might compromise safety in some way. So, what's the solution? Well, I don't intend to suggest that it's easy to get things right the second time. It's not. But the underlying problem has more to do with attitudes than the actual difficulty of the task, and there are ways of getting it right. These involve adjusting attitudes, first of all. Being more realistic and cautious, really.
Polar bears only live in the Arctic, primarily in northern Canada, northern Russia, and Alaska. If, for example, you are in southern Canada, you won't see any of these bears. Now, you're probably aware that the Arctic is an extremely harsh environment and one of the coldest places on Earth. But let me remind you of what it's really like in the Arctic, especially in late December or early January. The temperature frequently drops below minus 40 degrees centigrade and sometimes gets even colder. Combine that with strong winds, little or no sunlight, and very little vegetation, and what you get is an environment in which very few species are capable of surviving. The polar bear, however, thrives in this kind of environment. The polar bear spends his time roaming throughout the Arctic, walking on land and ice, swimming in freezing seawater, and floating on sheets of ice while looking for seals, fish, and other food. Their favorite food is seals, which they find along the edges of the ice, in holes in the ice, and under cracks in the ice. Polar bears are much bigger than the brown and black bears. In fact, they're huge. They weigh up to 720 kilograms, and they're designed to survive in their environment. They have very thick, white fur, which helps them hide in the snow and ice and overcome the extreme cold. Polar bears are also strong swimmers. They have large front paws that amazingly allow them to swim a few hundred kilometers from land.
I'm here to unveil a new carbon removal technology. one out of sight and uncelebrated. Meet our champions, seagrass, a very unlikely champion, but yet a remarkable power of carbon removal. Seagrasses occupy only 0.1% of the seafloor, but they remove 1/3 of all of the carbon that gets sequestered in the seafloor annually. They are no ordinary seagrasses, and yet we didn't know much about them. And when I started my journey of research and science with seagrasses about 4 decades ago, we knew that they were flowering plants that had adapted to grow and colonize the ocean, but we didn't know how amazing adaptations that was required to achieve this feat. In fact, only 7 years ago, we published the first genome sequence of a seagrass, and we were mesmerized at the amazing adaptations that were required to be able to colonize the ocean. And now we understand why only 70 species from among 300,000 or so species of flowering plants that are present in the biosphere have conquered the
There are two powerful phenomena unfolding on Earth: the rise of global warming and the rise of women and girls. The link between them is often overlooked, but gender equity is a key answer to our planetary challenge. Let me explain. For the last few years, I have been working on an effort called Project Drawdown. Our team has scoured humanity's wisdom for solutions to draw down heat-trapping, climate-changing emissions in the atmosphere. Not someday, maybe, if we're lucky, solutions. The 80 best practices and technologies already in hand. Clean, renewable energy, including solar and wind. Green buildings, both new and retrofitted. Efficient transportation from Brazil to China. Thriving ecosystems through protection and restoration. Reducing waste and reclaiming its value. Growing food in good ways that regenerate soil. Shifting diets to less meat, more plants, and equity for women and girls. Gender and climate are inextricably linked. Drawing down emissions depends on rising up.
To avoid dangerous climate change, we're going to need to cut emissions rapidly. That should be a pretty uncontentious statement, certainly with this audience. But here's something that's slightly more contentious. It's not going to be enough. We will munch our way through our remaining carbon budget for 1.5 degrees in a few short years, and the 2-degree budget in about 2 decades. We need to not only cut emissions extremely rapidly, we also need to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. I work assessing a whole range of these proposed techniques to see if they can work. We could use plants to take CO2 out and then store it in trees, in the soil, deep underground, or in the oceans. We could build large machines, so-called artificial trees, that will scrub CO2 from the air. For these ideas to be feasible, we need to understand whether they can be applied at a vast scale in a way that is safe, economic, and socially acceptable. All of these ideas come with trade-offs. None of them are perfect, but many have potential. It's unlikely that any one of them will solve it on its own.
I was studying in Paris and starting at 7 years old, flying back and forth between Dakar, Senegal, and Paris as an unaccompanied minor. So it wasn't just about the travel, it was really about a portal to knowledge, different environments, and adapting. Second thing that happened was every time I was at home, in Senegal, I wanted to talk to my friends in Paris. So my dad got tired of the long-distance bills, so he put a little lock on the phone, the rotary phone. I said, okay, no problem. Hacked it, and he kept getting the bills. Sorry again, Dad. And then, obviously, the internet was also emerging. So what really happened was that in terms of technology, I really saw it as something that shaped your experiences, how you understand the world, and wanting to be part of it. And for me, the common thread is that physical and virtual transportation, because that's really what that rotary phone was for me.
In 1995, a fellow named Chris Kleba decided to open a gym in his hometown of Northville, Michigan. Fitness had changed his life, and he wanted others in small-town Michigan to have the same experience. But the problem with gyms is they can be intimidating. It's the ultimate irony. You go to a gym to get in shape, but if you're out of shape, you feel like you need to get in shape just to show up. That's why as many as 50% of gym members quit within the first year, which is fine if you open a gym in New York or LA with millions of people. But in a small town, you might simply run out of customers. Now, many gyms try to solve this problem by making it difficult to quit. So now, not only am I feeling guilty about not going to the gym, but I'm stuck paying $100 a month, and I'm still not getting any thinner. But Chris decided to do something different. Chris decided to invest in his workers.
Today we have Paul Whitner, Head of Theatre Studies, here to tell us a bit about the Theatre Studies programme. Paul, what makes this course different?
Well, I think it's the environment we can offer students. We're a relatively small conservatoire, and we offer superb courses in a number of subjects, with an opportunity for performance. We've built a reputation for producing both traditional and alternative performances. I guess the course would appeal to potential students for the level of support that's available, and I mean from the tutors as well as from the fellow students and alumni. There's a real sense of community.
So, what are you looking for in prospective students?
I guess we're looking for people who are able to cope with the high demands that the course will put on them. In that way, I think the programme reflects the workplace we're preparing them for, so it's incredibly intense and we cover a huge range of projects, and they will be introduced to areas of performance design which they might never have considered before. We need students with imagination and dedication who are able to keep up when the going gets tough. It can be demanding, but we have to remember that the college enjoys an excellent reputation for student retention, student satisfaction, and student employment after graduation.
global trade, increased 200 times, and lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty.
The modifications might compromise safety in some way.
The temperature frequently drops below -40 degrees centigrade and sometimes gets even colder.